Welcome to Let's Talk Wellness, where we will be sharing insights into the world of mental health and wellness as we explore traditional medicine and holistic healing options. It's time to have new conversations about mental health. Join Mara James, the founder and CEO of the Hugs for Life Healing Center, as she guides us along this journey. And now, let's talk wellness.
Welcome to Let's Talk Wellness. I am your host, Mara James, and I'm excited to introduce you to the founder of #SameHere Global Mental Health Movement, Eric Kussin.
Hey, Mara, how are you?
Good, great to see you. How's the weather out there on the East Coast?
It's good. I actually, when you asked the weather out on the East Coast, I was just in Arizona for the run that the Suns were on. That was my old team I used to work for. So I went from very, very hot but dry heat to now not as hot but a lot of humidity. So
yeah, well, you have to come out one day. Hopefully we'll have the event at the Warriors and we can meet up in California.
Yes, that'd be awesome.
Awesome. So Eric, can you please share with our friends watching and listening about your journey, your personal journey with mental health?
Yeah, and I've shared, you know a little bit of it, so please chime in here as I'm sharing if it helps break it up. But I shared sports, so I worked in professional sports for 15 years, and mostly on the NBA and the NHL side of things. And 6 months into my tenure with the Florida Panthers, I hit a brick wall. My brain and my body ceased to function. It's the best way I could describe it. And these doctors that I went to tried me on every type of psychotropic drug combination you could imagine. I was laying in bed for 2.5 years, just staring at the ceiling, not watching TV, not listening to radio, just essentially dead to the world. As the goal on their end, and the way it was explained to me, was your brain is like a soup with chemicals, and they're trying to put the right chemicals in there to make the soup taste the right way again, right? This line that we get fed about that you have a chemical imbalance, which I'm not denying that's some piece of it, but that's the way it's explained to us in total. They got to find the right magic combination that's going to now pop you out of this. And so 2.5 years of that, not feeling better, 99% of the time in the bed, the other 1% going to the doctors. And then I was eventually recommended to do TMS therapy, transcranial magnetic stimulation, where they put a helmet on your head and shoot electromagnetic waves in your brain to try and wake up the neurons to start firing again. 22 sessions into that, 22 days in a row, because they want you to do them consecutive days, about 45 minutes a session. I couldn't fall asleep the night of the 23rd then. And on the night of the 23rd, going to the morning of the 24th, I was looking at this bottle of pills on my counter, and the only thought going through my head was, swallow that bottle, swallow that bottle, swallow that bottle. And I share this openly because nothing bad had happened in my life during that 2.5 year span situationally. No one passed away. I didn't have any bad breakups. No dog had died, nothing like that. So where do these thoughts come from, right? And we'll get back to that. But I had this overwhelming, what I call an error message playing in my mind. I know I don't want to follow through with this, but my mind, I'm sitting on my hands, stopping myself from lunging towards the bottle because I can't stop my mind from almost this magnetic pull towards it. So I go inpatient to a psych ward because I want to get help. And that's the only way that I know to get help. And that's the only way society's told us that we can get help when we're feeling that way. And I met with the attending psychiatrist the first day I was there, skipping a lot of details, but she looked at my chart. I looked at her. I was looking at her top doctor plaques on the wall. And she said, Eric, you've tried everything there is. Your last resort is to do shock therapy. And when you're a patient and you hear last resort, that's the scariest thing you can hear. And people, when I tell that story, they're like, shock therapy? I would have eaten, the joke that I tell is I would have eaten 10 scoops of manure from the horses that the cops ride out here in New York City 10 times a day if it meant I would feel better. I didn't care what the modality was. I just wanted to feel better. But she's telling me this is my final option. And this is happening to me, to give some historical perspective, in the middle of 2017. So I don't have anyone to talk to about this. It's not like family members are sharing, oh, this is what happened when I went through shock therapy, right? Like no one has that background. And if they are, most people don't openly share it. So at that point, you take the doctor's opinion, right? And you go through with it. And so I did 12 sessions of shock therapy over 5 weeks. They put you under general anesthesia and they put electrodes on your brain and shock you into seizure, hoping that the neurons are going to start firing again. Not so dissimilar to the TMS therapy, just a greater, invasive piece of it. And I leave the hospital after the 5 weeks feeling no better than I had the 2.5 years prior. So in my mind, my life is over because I'm this thing called treatment resistant, and I've been given every label under the sun by every single specialist: melancholic depression, anhedonic depression, generalized anxiety disorder, OCD, PTSD, ADHD, ADD. And you hear those terms and you don't know that, like, the reason the doctors are throwing those terms at you is because they studied certain things in school. The brain is complicated. You can find some kind of similarity in the path of things that are going through your mind to fit this criteria of this DSM-5 book, of diagnostic book that they have. Most people who sit in a psychiatrist chair, if you psychoanalyze their brain, you could find something that's going wrong with it. Side note there, but we'll get back to that. So I'm thinking my life is over unless Merck or Pfizer or Johnson & Johnson invents some miracle pill to knock me out of this and kind of fix the soup of my brain. And serendipity as it would be, my parents go to these continuing education courses all the time. They're retired educators. And so they went to this course called integrative breathing practices. And I didn't know what the term integrative meant. And I'd never done a breathing practice before in my life. So it didn't really register to me what they were going to, not to mention much wasn't registering to me then anyway. But they go, and then my mom comes back from that course. And I remember it was like 9 o'clock at night. She runs up to this twin bed that I'm in because I'm living at home where I was as a child. She's like, we met this woman. She's a doctor. She's a psychologist doctor. She treats differently than all these other doctors you've been to. Please go see her. Please, just give it a chance. Okay, I'll give it a chance. So 3 days later, I'm on her couch. And what I expected was the same chronology of questions that I got every doctor I'd been to up until that point, which always went, Eric, what are your symptoms? Lack of executive functioning, cognitive fog, fatigue, run down, can't get out of bed, can't think straight, can't put a sentence together. Right. And then based on my symptoms, they would give me one of those diagnoses. And then based on my diagnosis, I would then be given the pill that's supposed to fix me. She didn't do that at all. She just said, Eric, I want to know about you. Tell me about you, Eric, the person. Right. And like when you're in a doctor's office that you think you're supposed to be psychoanalyzed, you're expecting the questions to be, tell me about your relationship with your mother, and it wasn't like that at all. So how often does someone just blanketly ask you, maybe on a date, like, tell me about you? But even then, you usually like, oh, I'm a family person, right? So when a doctor says, I just want to get to, like, go to your earliest memories, just let me know about you. Well, for me, it was, I just started talking about my brother because my earliest memories are my older brother being sick and injured. At 8 years old. So he's older than I am. And I have a younger brother as well. But the older brother was 12. I'm 8. And the little brother was 2. This is when this all started. Older brother gets into a sporting accident, football accident, breaks his femur bone and largest bone in his body, and put in a body cast for a year, homeschooled. Okay. A lot of kids get into accidents. Can't really think of that as anything major. A month later, he gets diagnosed with ALL, children's form of leukemia. So 5 years of chemo and radiation in the late 80s, you don't have the best prognosis when you have leukemia in the 80s, right? Like we're holding on for dear life every single day. But again, miracle, he goes into remission. A month later, after he goes into remission, he's in a Jeep Wrangler with his friends, the one that's got the open top and the open back and nothing really to protect you, no seatbelts in the back. Car loses control on the parkway, New York. So it's on the Meadowbrook Parkway. He lands on his head, cracks his head open, loses partial vision in his eyes, in ICU for a month. Heals from that, goes to college, feeling a pain in his knee. They do all this testing. His leukemia from childhood has come back. Now they have to give him a stronger chemo regimen to really knock the cancerous cells out. But what do we know about chemo is, as good as it is at knocking the cancerous cells out, it also hurts many of the healthy cells, and hair falling out like usual, like you see most of the time. But on top of that, his body starts breaking down. You could tell his joints are getting really weak. And I get a call from my father. I'm up at school at this point, up at college to come back down to Long Island, that he's got 105 fever. They have to take him into the hospital. His body goes into what's called septic shock. So the chemo was ravaging his body so much that his body just lost it. And then the organs started attacking themselves, falls into a coma. And by the time I get there, we're getting addressed by the neurologist, who's telling us he doesn't know if he's ever going to wake from the coma. And if he does, whether he's going to have any brain function, cognitive abilities at all. We have the right, if we want, to keep the tube breathing for him, but they can't guarantee any outcomes. And this is the late 90s at this point. So think about technology now versus then. They're not able to read anything. And still, when someone's in a coma now, it's such a crapshoot. So that goes on for 1 month, 2 months, 3 months. Finally, the end of the third month, he wakes. A little bit of a comic relief here. He asks if the Yankees won the World Series. So he somehow remembered that that was going on prior to. And but his kidneys fail from the rigor of the septic shock. So even though his cognitive abilities are back, he has to go on dialysis. We all get tested to see who's the closest match. My father donates a kidney to him. I get my first job at the NBA league office shortly after that, thinking childhood over, blank slate, and that year, 3 of my close friends, 22 and 23 years of age, die of heart conditions, like freak things. One guy running on a treadmill at 6 a.m, who was in great shape, but undiagnosed heart condition, and he passes. And so when I'm sharing that with this woman, her jaw's dropped, one, but the other thing is she says, Eric, is there anything else that happened to you as a child that impacted your mental health that I need to know about? And I shows how little I knew about mental health at the time. I said, what do you mean impacted by mental health? I wasn't on the treadmill with my friend. I wasn't in the car with my brother. Like, these things didn't happen to me. They happened to them. And so she took a deep breath and she said, Eric, you had a front row seat for all these events. You watch them, and it almost like mud splattering on you every time you're watching that event happen. The mud keeps splattering and it's getting you dirtier and dirtier. You don't know to take a proverbial shower to wash it off. Eventually, by the time you're 35 and you're living in Florida, it gets so heavy that it just takes your body down, and it's too heavy at this point. Not surprisingly, right? We're seeing what's happening with so many athletes right now having to pull out, right? It's a cumulative buildup over time. And so when she explained that to me, my immediate reaction was, I'm 35, take the average 15-year-old, 20 years younger than me, the divorce of their parents, the job loss of their parents, and then the potential loss of a house, their best friends' friendship breaking up, their best friends' relationship breaking up and them being crushed because they're no longer with that boyfriend or girlfriend, them watching their friend being verbally abused in the schoolyard, hearing about their friend being sexually abused by their friend telling them, hearing about a friend go through the sickness of a loved one or the loss of a loved one at a young age. I was like, that's only a part of the list. If you're telling me all we need to do is watch those other people in our lives, our parents, our friends, whatever, go through those things, and that impacts our mental health, then whose mental health hasn't been impacted? Because that's everybody. And that's not the narrative that's out there. And so she kind of like, smiled in kind of like a sage smile type way. It's like, Eric, that's what I believe. That's why I practice integrative medicine. And she was explaining to me how the mind-body connection, and she explained about the Bessel van der Kolk book, The Body Keeps Score, and how what we see impacts not just our brain, but our whole neurobiology, and that there's different modalities that we need to start working and cleansing essentially that mud that's built up in my central nervous system off. So she sends me to a weekend breathing course. I'll skip the details of that, but I'm the only man, only one under 40, and only one born in this country. So it was me and 8 Indian women and 9 yoga mats. And another, something to laugh about, but also something to cry about, that like, where are the everyday people who live in this country who aren't learning this from a foreign culture already, bringing it here, but that are just understanding mental health and wanting to work on it the way that we go to the gym and we run? That's not common, right? That's why I was the only person that looked that way. But I learned through that breathing pattern, and we can get into that when we go into questions, how to start cleansing that central nervous system to the point where my brain started to come back online. And when it came back online, I decided to share my story. And I did it through social media on LinkedIn, because I didn't have Instagram. I didn't have Twitter. I wasn't like a social media person. And in putting it on LinkedIn, it just starts getting shared. Now, this was right before the whole Kevin Love, DeMar DeRozan era. So it's getting shared, I guess, because I'm a sports executive. I don't know what other reason why. And maybe because it's relatable to people that I share the stuff about my brother and my friends, as opposed to just saying, I have PTSD, right? So 150,000 times it's read, or at least viewed and looked at on these social channels. And I have over 400 calls that come in from as far as China. And this was the first impetus for forming an organization, was the calls consistently were not about disorder. No one was saying, Eric, I have PTSD also, or Eric, I have bipolar. It's different than PTSD in this way. Instead, everyone was sharing a lived experience story. I lost a child to SIDS 5 years ago, and I've never been the same, all the way to I'm a married mother, love my husband, soulmate, but I broke up with my college boyfriend 10 years ago after dating him for 4 years in school. And that knot that was in my stomach from when I felt that, that awful feeling that I was going to change the course of our lives, that knot has never left me, even though I'm with my soulmate now. I'm like, okay, I'm not a therapist, but what starts to, piece together, right? Like, I didn't have 10,000 hours the way that Malcolm Gladwell talks about it, but I had enough of hearing these stories every single day for 2 weeks to be like, the common thread here is not illness. It's not disorder. It's challenging life events that we've been through that then impact the nervous system and the neurobiology in such a way that we end up with similar, not exactly the same, but similar symptomatology. And if that's the case, why isn't that the narrative that we're talking about in the mental health space? And so, I was ready to go back into sports and say, I've got relationships with athletes. I'll just pass them off to whatever organizations out there, could use them. But I go to look up these organizations, and I won't mention the names, but they're the largest, mental health organizations in our country, in our world for that matter. And I see the same messages on all of them. They're consistent. And I don't know if it's purposefully misleading because it helps a lot of the funders where they do get funding from pharmaceutical companies, or they just don't know any better and they think these are the right messages. And I've, poked and prodded enough in the last 3 years to try and figure that out, which we can also get into. But essentially the messages were, I think, the antithesis of what we need to hear in this space. So 3 in particular that they all led with. First was 1 in 5 people are mentally ill. That creates a thick line between illness and health. And it's basically telling people you're either in this category of the ill people or you're in this category of the healthy people, and you're one or the other, choose. And that's not how mental health works, right? So that was problematic by itself. Second problem was that they have campaigns, right? Calls to action, like, let's get people out. And their calls to action, they want to normalize the conversation. So what was their campaign? Well, the first one that started with a campaign was Stop the Stigma. And then every campaign followed after it was Stomp the Stigma, Break the Stigma, Erase the Stigma. So it was an action word followed by stigma. The term stigma means human beings, people, are forming opinions and judgments unfairly about another group of people. So if me and Mara start the organization, the Eric and Mara organization for mental health, and we're like, stop the stigma, that's a great rallying cry for us. It's an absolutely awful rallying cry to get the other people who don't think that mental health is a topic for them to come along with us, because it's just pushing them further away. So that was the second piece. And then the third piece that I saw was they all would link to celebrity stories as if it was a badge of honor that other celebrities fit in this 1 in 5 category. So Britney Spears has depression. She's in part of our 1 in 5 category. Lindsay Lohan has anxiety. And then what they would link to is the Us Weekly and the People magazine article done with the paparazzi taking the picture. And it's like, Britney Spears has depression, shaves her head. Lindsay Lohan has anxiety, dresses like a hot mess. So you add those 3 things up. 1 in 5 people are mentally ill. Let's stop stigmatizing that group of 1 in 5. And if you want to know if you're in that group of 1 in 5, have you shaved your head, put your lipstick on your face the wrong way, and run off the basketball court in a panic attack? Yes, sign me up. I'm part of that group, right? Like, that's why people don't engage with this topic. And so that was the reason behind forming, the umbrella name of our organization. I know we introduced us as Same Here correctly, is the umbrella name of the organization is We're All a Little Crazy. Crazy is in quotes. And we had to launch that way because find me another term in the dictionary that speaks somewhat to mental health in a tongue-in-cheek type of way that gets people in this proverbial 4 and 5 category to pay attention and be like, I'm a little crazy. I'll listen to that, right? And I knew I was going to deal with people who are technically, by the way, I'm one of them, in the 1 in 5 category that's diagnosed, who are going to say, yeah, right, you're raising your hand too. That's not the right term to use in this space. That's not, you know what? I had to take that chance that I was going to offend some people in order to get the 4 and 5s to start paying attention. And the beautiful thing was, I didn't have money to spend, right? It was what started to build on social media, start to see 10,000, 20,000. And then you like Facebook, you're like 70,000 people are willing to wear this badge of honor saying, I'm a little crazy too, right? And so, okay, if that's our name, what was our campaign? The same way that these organizations had the Stop the Stigma campaign, ours became Same Here. And that's how you introduce us. Like, just like Nike might just be known for just do it instead of just Nike sometimes, our campaign that we lead with, Same Here, is an American Sign Language sign where I'm pointing at Mara and I'm saying, Mara, me pointing at my chest to you, you and I were the same. And I can do that 1-to-1, or I could do that 1 to 3,000 if I'm talking on a stage, because I know that we're the same because you're a human being and I'm a human being. And as a human being, you've been through stuff and I've been through stuff. That's what human beings go through. And I don't need to know whether you had depression and I had PTSD or not. And in fact, let's get away from the labels, because if we just focus on the labels and yours is OCD and mine is PTSD, then the previous way that society has told us to understand this is, I'll never understand you and you'll never understand me. I got to stay in my group. You got to stay in your group. And that's bogus. That, like, how many people, I'm going a little bit off tangent, then I'll stop here. Like, what do we have? 3 or 4 people in our lives that, yes, let's go of labels. How many people in our lives do we have that we feel so close to that we could just open up about anything? 3, 4, if we're lucky. Some people 1. Okay, maybe the most 5 or 6. If we go based on you have to have had the same experience and the same label to relate to someone else, how many in your small circle of 1 to 3 to 5 have been through the exact same thing you have? Probably none, right? Maybe 1 if the stars aligned in an unfortunate way, right? So like these messages are in place to keep us separate and keep us in different buckets. When we're separate, when we're in different buckets and we feel alone, guess what we need? We need miracle cures and we need miracle, apps that help us get out of things. And it's not a knock on some of these organizations that want to help people. It's just, I'm at the point now of being in it for a number of years where I'm so upset with the entrepreneurship being what's placed above the health. You want to be an entrepreneur in the health space, all the power to you. Do it the right way that connects people. Don't separate people into buckets and make them feel alone and then make them feel that they need your product. Educate people, explain how you heal together, and through that togetherness, fine, you'll be successful. But you don't need the venture capitalist who's telling you, you got to return 2x, 3x, 5x on my money, so put this message in there right now. Anyway, that's been our organization the last 3 years, and we can go into like the actual programming, but I want to give you the story first.
That is, oh my gosh, thank you for your vulnerability and your openness to share with us. We're going to take a really quick break, and when we come back, we're going to have some questions for you. We'll talk, definitely want to hear about how the breath work changed your life, and if you're still taking meds or not, and we'll also talk about the Same Here. So if everybody can hold on, we'll be right back.
In these shifting and changing times, more and more lives are being impacted by mental health. The Extraordinary Lives Foundation, also known as ELF, is transforming the way people view and navigate mental health challenges. Their mission is to improve children's mental health and wellness and support families by providing educational tools, resources, and awareness events. ELF encourages families to recognize symptoms, overcome the stigma, and reach out for help. Through prevention, early intervention, and holistic treatment, we believe many of the big problems facing today's youth can be transformed within a generation. Extraordinary Lives Foundation is excited to offer the Hugs for Life Healing Center, growing a worldwide network of approved holistic healers and bridging the gap between traditional and complementary healing options. visit the Extraordinary Lives Foundation website at www.elfempowers.org to find out more about their resources and events. Together, we can change the conversation around mental health. We hope that you're enjoying today's Let's Talk Wellness podcast. And if you have a topic that you would like us to explore, we would love to hear from you. Simply email us at info@elfempowers.org. That's info@elfempowers.org. And now, back to the show.
Welcome back to Let's Talk Wellness. I am your host, Mara James, and today we have Eric Kussin, the founder of the Same Here Global Health Mental Health Movement.
How you doing, Mara? So great to be back.
Yeah, great. Thanks for coming back. Gosh, I have so many questions for you, and I know we have limited time. So you were talking about breath work. So can you share with us in more details? I mean, did you start breathing? You stopped your medication, or what really happened there?
So I didn't stop the medication. What the integrative psychiatrist told me to do is let's minimize the medication down to one, because they had been trying so many different. I went back on just Lexapro by itself. And in the breathing practice, the best way I could describe it is we go to the gym for our muscles, right? And we do things like heavy weights to put muscle on in a bulky way, medium-sized weights to just get fit, light weights to get cut up, right? So you know that there's different sizes of the weights that you're going to lift to get different outcomes. If you and I were sitting in a room together and a car crashed through the wall because it lost control, we were on the first floor of a building. Obviously not the most pleasant thing to think about, but neither of us got injured, and we looked at that car crash through, we'd go like this, right? So we would change the way that we're breathing. And there's a nerve that goes in our neck from our right where kind of our brainstem is down through the neck in two branches into our stomach. That's called the vagus nerve. Now, it makes sense that what would develop as human beings is we see things with our brains, with our eyes, and then our body has to react based on what we see, right? So think of that vagus nerve as the carrier messenger, that the way that we change our breathing based on the stimulus around us, now all of a sudden, whoa, what do I need to do? Do I need to be, all the things that we hear about, fight, flight, right? And so the reason I bring up the car example instead of like a tiger coming to our fire pit or something like that is because it's a common day thing that might happen. But a car doesn't crash through a wall every day. But what does happen is parents get sick and children come home crying from school and they're bullied and you feel upset for them, and the boss is on you, upset with the work product that you just created. So that breathing is happening to us throughout the course of a day, sometimes without us realizing it, subconsciously, right? We're sitting at our computer typing and our mind is going through, what's the boss going to say to me when they come in, right? What's going to happen when I go home tonight and I see my kid? Are they going to have self-harmed? Am I going to see something on their wrist? Like, we're thinking about these things and it changes the way we breathe. So why did I bring up the weight example earlier is because what they teach you in this breathing class was called the Art of Living is 3 different patterns of breath. Very long in and out breaths, medium in and out, and then quick in out like that. And what that does is you're preparing that vagus nerve to create what's called greater vagal tone, flexibility, so that your body is used to being able to react to the stressors of what's going on around you. If you're someone like me who was living in perpetual fear that the next shoe is going to drop all the time because that's what continuously happened, guess what? Your vagus nerve is tight and there's no tone to it whatsoever, right? It's like basically going to the gym and just holding the muscle like this and never letting go of that clenched fist on the barbell. So by doing that exercise, what started to happen, back to that idea of like taking the hard brush and getting the mud off you, is you start to normalize this neurobiology. You're sending messages between the brain and the body that, hey, like the end of the world isn't happening tomorrow just because the phone's ringing, because the last time you picked up the phone, you did get bad news, right? And that's, I'm giving a microcosm, right? Because there's so many other neurobiological changes that happen. And breathing is just one example of the many modalities that we can talk about that exist to start to work on normalizing our central nervous system again. But I think that's why I had such good success with the breathing, is because I understood how it would help me. And I think buy-in, when people pick up a meditation app and the tagline is get 10% happier in 10 days, what does that mean? What is meditation doing for me? That I believe that's why people stay with things, is because they learn, even if it's simple, the science behind how it's helping. And it, like, think about when you go to the gym, you don't get on the treadmill in 2 days and run for 45 minutes and sweat your butt off and look at the scale and be like, I didn't lose 15 pounds yet. What's going on? Right. But that's what we expect with mental health. Like, I did meditation for 2 days and I'm not feeling better. Right. We have to be on the treadmill for 30 days and we're lucky if we lose 2 pounds. It's the same thing with our mental health. It's an ongoing change that we need to bring about. So, hopefully that helped answer your question on the breathing piece. There's so much else to it, and that led to then my curiosity in learning other healing modalities and traveling around the world to try and figure out what else was out there. But breathing was such a big piece of the beginning of my healing process.
Right. So you know me, and with the Hugs for Life Healing Center, the goal is to bridge the gap between medical professionals and holistic healers. So if you could share with me and with our friends out there, where you traveled and what you found out, we'd love to hear.
Yeah, so the first trip, and I thank my friend, I'm going to call her out, Cherie Wong is her name. I went to Cornell with her. She's from Hong Kong, and she had found out about this course in Jakarta, Indonesia, on Qigong meditation. And so she went to the course unbeknownst to me, came back, found it life-changing. So the first time I ever went anywhere was on her recommendation. Pretty ridiculous when you think about this trip. I flew 26 hours. There is a small connection in China. 26 hours to sit in a hotel lobby and learn this Qigong meditation from the Qigong master, not leave the hotel the entire 8 days I was there, never go to Bali or anything like that after that long of a trip, and then just fly 26 hours back and start working again. But what I learned in that course is that, again, the healing power of the breath, we have meridians in our body. And when the energy that's in our body, right? I'm gonna use science again, because I think when people understand it with science, they buy into it. We breathe oxygen and we eat food, and the glucose and the oxygen in our mitochondria, in our cells. So I'm not talking about spiritual energy. I'm talking about energy that we actually ingest, becomes what's called ATP, adenosine triphosphate, means that there's 3 bonds. And when we need energy, the ATP becomes ADP. One of the bond breaks, becomes adenosine diphosphate, 2 bonds. And with that bond breaking, the energy flows into our system. So when I need to pick up my hands and do this, it's energy that's happening from the energy that's in my cells. Well, where does that energy flow through, right? We know blood flows through our veins. We know lymph flows through our lymphatic system. Energy has these meridians, but Western medicine doesn't acknowledge meridians because you can't see them under electron microscope, so they don't acknowledge it. So he taught us all the different connections of the meridian points and explained to us how doing Qigong breathing meditation, and we built up. We did 30 minutes, then 45 minutes, then an hour, then imagine people like 50 of us at a time just sitting in a room for 2 hours straight meditating, right? So, but the breath work with the meditation within Qigong is actually about building up energy sources. They call them dantians. Think of them almost as pots. So you're building the energy up in these pots, so then the energy could then flow to other areas of your body that it needs. So when you see people doing Tai Chi and it looks like they're dancing, what they're doing is they're actually moving energy throughout their body, right? And it looks like voodoo stuff for people, right? And if my 18-year-old self heard my 42-year-old self talking about this stuff, it probably smacked me in the face. Like, you're a football player. What are you talking about doing, like, Qigong meditation and Yin Yoga, and right? But okay, so that was one. I worked with a woman named Amy Weintraub, who teaches what's called Life Force Yoga. She teaches all over the world, and I learned about Yin Yoga. So not like just vinyasa flow, which is certainly great, but holding poses longer, because that energy that stores up inside of us, right? The body keeps score. Why do we have a pain in our neck? Why do we have GI problems? There's stretches that we can do and poses that we can do that start to release that energy and tension from our body. Another one, I mean, I can go on forever, but I'll just give you another one example. Went to Arizona to learn TRE from a gentleman named David Bercelli. TRE is the trauma release exercises, which is the natural trauma response that all animals have. So we don't realize it as humans because we don't naturally do it. But if you watch an animal out in the wild and a predator is chasing a prey and prey gets away, after they get away and they know they're in the clear, you see their body tremble. Why? Because the buildup of the cortisol and everything in their body from running away from that predator needs to escape them somehow. Well, we've got these beautiful things called prefrontal cortexes. So when we get away from trauma, instead of trembling naturally, what we do is we think about what just happened. And we're like, did that really just happen to me? Oh my God, how do I process that? How do I explain that? I don't understand, right? So we don't have the natural release responses. If you really want to read an interesting book, it's called Waking the Tiger by a guy named Peter Levine, back all the way in I think it was the 90s or maybe even 80s. But he knew all about this trauma built up in our system, and it gets frozen inside of us, right? And it's the remnants of the cars coming through the walls in life that have happened so many times. And so TRE actually teaches you how to induce the human tremor response, because we're animals, and you start to tremor out and shake out the tremor, the trauma that's inside of our body. I'll just say this. We call them collectively as our group, we call them STAR exercises: stress and trauma, active release, and rewiring. And so what you're doing with your group, if you want to get together on that, happy to, because we've got a whole group of integrative practitioners that, from a branding perspective, needed to create a concept around people understanding what these other modalities were and not calling them Eastern functional, holistic, or alternative, because people would turn away from that, but actually understanding the science. We've got the stress and trauma that builds in us. We need to do activities that release and rewire them out. And just like the gym, where I can go and I can do biceps, triceps, I can do, plyometric box jumping, and I can do, the elliptical machine. Why isn't it common knowledge that we can do many things for our mental health? Instead, people are like, well, I tried that thing called Headspace and it didn't work, so I guess I'm not a meditator. So it's either medication or not. That's what we've taught society. Like, it's amazing. And that's marketing. And again, I can't go down too much of a rabbit hole, because who knows, they'll come and shoot me in a bunker at some point. But that message sells and makes people billions of dollars, and it prevents people from healing. And these healing modalities are out there. We're not talking about them openly.
Wow, that's wonderful. And it's so funny because I just wrote Piggy Bear's second book, is Piggy Bear's Power of Happiness. And it talks about sad, anger, and fear. And literally, when you have it, how you have to work off the energy before you could just do the breathing. And so it's so profound. Wow, I love all the healing that you're doing. So it doesn't matter your answer. I'm just curious. Are you still taking medication?
Yeah, no, I don't mind sharing that. So I'm working with a functional medicine doctor in addition to my integrative psychiatrist. So my new belief on the right quarterback for you when you're dealing with your mental health, when I say dealing with, that's anyone that's wanting to be proactive, that's at the place of disorder, is, and I know this can get expensive for some people, so sometimes you got to choose one versus the other. But the integrative psychiatrist is the person that, if meds are involved, we talk about that, but then the modalities like the breathing, the yogas, the meditations, all that stuff. The functional medicine doctor, and you'll see why I'm asking this question about medicine this way, is the functional medicine doctor is looking at the function of my body, my gene expression, what nutrients get absorbed the right way, right? And so I'm deficient in certain things. I've got this gene mutation called the MTHFR gene. I'm sure you've heard about that. So I needed to get my nutrition right. I had to take protein shakes in the morning because I wasn't getting enough protein, right? But one of the pieces of that is I'm taking something called micronutrients. Micronutrients are the precursors for building the neurotransmitters in your brain. And I'm taking them. I mean, here's a pixie stick, that one of them, what it looks like. You just take it sublingually in your mouth. You do it twice a day. And now it's surpassing whatever you're eating in terms of your nutrition. You're making sure your brain is getting the nutrition it needs, which is allowing me to go down on the Lexapro that I'm on with the goal of eventually being off it. Now, in fairness to everyone else out there, I don't have this goal of like, I need a badge of honor to say that I'm off Lexapro. I just want to do it because I think it's healthier to not be on something than to be on something. And if I can do it naturally, I do it naturally. If I get to the point where I'm down to a certain amount on Lexapro and I'm feeling awful, I have no qualms about going back up to 10 to 15, whatever right? So my take with medication is it's one of the tools in the toolbox. It works for some people. It doesn't work for other people. But I just want to say medication is not a cure. That you have to do many other things and work on yourself in addition to whatever medications you're taking, or it's very hard to get better from this. You can't just sit back. I'm the poster child for sitting back and waiting for medication to kick in. It just doesn't work that way.
Definitely, it's more of a Band-Aid, and it's great to stabilize, but then, encouraging people to take that step into the healing is profound. That's wonderful. So now that once you got your mental health kind of under control, you were then inspired to start this organization. So can you share with us about that before we have to hop off?
Yeah. Well, when you say under control, I laugh a little bit because I think we're all works in progress. And I have days where I'm like,
you pass on.
I'm sure like you've had these days also where you're just like, wait a second. I felt this way 3 years ago. You're telling me I'm going to be feeling this way again, ever again? Like I shouldn't feel this way for 20 seconds, let alone for 2 days, right? So for anyone else out there, like your healing journey, they say it's not a straight line. Not only is it not a straight line, it's literally like the most polar opposite point sometimes it can be.
And long.
What's that?
Long journey.
Oh, yes.
I've been doing it for 7 years.
Yeah, it's just it's so up and down and all over the place, and there's no linearity. But to your point, to your question about forming the organization, so it was serendipitously, I think Prince Harry had come out with his story right before I started feeling better, and I noticed within that year of as I started to get better that I thought shared in a very vulnerable way. This is before all the BS with the royal stuff and whether him and Meghan are honest or not. I'm talking about like the Prince Harry of, 5 years ago, where he was still like the favored son, maybe not the favorite son because they were both favored, but, a lovable character that there was no controversy around. He shared very vulnerably. Like people loved the way he shared. He talked about his mom and losing his mom and going to therapy and not just putting a label on it saying I have depression. He went deep into the what, which is what we need public figures to do. Now, even in doing that, the UK a year later was at a 30-year high in suicides. So I'm saying to myself, this topic of mental health does not change here in the US. If Lady Gaga is the biggest endorser, or if LeBron James is the biggest endorser, or Michael, that's they're a person that has an influence. And even if you want to talk about their, social media numbers, if one of them has 50 million followers, they send something out, it only goes to 20 million. Only 5 million of those 20 million read it. Only 2 million of those 5 million agree with it. And then there's like 2 other million or 1 million maybe in there that are like, I don't believe that at all. I don't agree with that. So even a 50 million person is only positively impacting 1 or 2 million in a world that there's 7 billion people in, right? So how are you going to change trends? How are you going to shift society's perception? And so my thought process was, and obviously this is going to be a build for the rest of my life, is you have to form alliances of people, athletes, celebrities, doctors, the folks that you're talking about, practitioners in these different modalities, students, CEOs. And so we started building all these alliances where it wasn't just like hey, come join us, you can be part of us. It's take a picture on the website, share your vulnerable story. Within your vulnerable story, now we're going to start networking you. You saw with the Golden State Warriors, they've got an event. What can we do with these doctors to help educate during this event? What can we do with these athletes or celebrities? You saw how hard it is for the Golden State Warriors even to get their assistant coach to do something, right? So I've worked at teams before. The access to players isn't always there. Can I be one of the people that helps get access to players to events so that we help raise the profile of it? So the goal of what we've been doing for the last 3 years is saying let's continue to network and build these alliances where people from around not only the US, but the globe now can start to say, what's going on there where you guys are starting to talk about mental health as 5 and 5 on a continuum, everyone affected, all in it together, kind of what we were saying as we were coming into the segment, as opposed to saying, oh, we're the organization that's called, I'm gonna give one organization out there just because I have to say it. Our organization is called the Real Depression Project, right? And then it's named after the disorder. And then every post, which gets all these likes, but the post is like, this is how you should treat people with depression because this is how they deserve to be treated. Again, it becomes an us versus them thing instead of a, hey guys, you've dealt with depression a little bit yourself. Let me explain to you what it feels like for me so we can meet in the middle somewhere so you could understand it, right? And this incessant focus on labeling, disordering, all that stuff. So anyway, the programmatically we work with K-12s, colleges, offices, sports teams and leagues, and then servicemen and women and first responders. And we build in these different alliance members into these programs so that you start to see this matrix coming together of, okay, anytime where we start to see mental health, we're seeing the same concepts of continuum, 5 and 5. Everyone faces challenges, all in it together, different healing modalities. Think about how divergent that is from the messages that have been out there for the last 30 years, right? So that's what, that's the MO, and we don't have any qualms about like, okay, the brand needs to be this way, or we're always about like, let's form partnerships with other groups as long as the core concepts are the same. You do co-branding, you do, events together, right? Like you don't get concerned about whose logo is higher or lower. That stuff just bothers the crap out of me. You get out there what helps people and what they need, and then and you lead with caring about other people first.
That is beautiful. So what is the best way for people to get in touch with you?
Thank you. So it's for website, it's just same here. So SAMEHERE global.org. And then if you want to email me directly, it's eric@samehereglobal.org. And then from there on social media, it's at the @ same here. And the only thing that's different is there's an underscore before global, and I saw the mention of, lead with helping people first. For any entrepreneur in the mental health space, let me say two things to you. When you are collaborating with someone else, someone who has genuine interest in helping other people can sniff you out immediately when your first motive is money. So don't think you're fooling anyone when you're on the phone if you try to make it about helping other people, because if your first MO is money, they can tell. That's number one. Number two, the world pays you back. So it might not be in 1 year, 3 years, 5 years, 7 years. If you're putting good into the world, financially, eventually you start getting supported in some way. Someone notices what you're doing, whether it's through donations, whether it's through products that you're able to sell, or ideas that you come up with, or books like you do that you write. It all comes back in the back end. And so lead with your heart, get in this space because you want to help people, not because you want to make money.
Beautiful. Eric, it's been such a pleasure seeing you and speaking with you today. And to you and all of our listeners, always remember, you are amazing.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Let's Talk Wellness. This podcast has been brought to you by the Hugs for Life Healing Center, a division of the Extraordinary Lives Foundation, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. If you would like to listen to more conversations like this, we invite you to subscribe to our mailing list at www.elfempowers.org to be notified when our weekly episodes are published. Thank you for joining us, and we look forward to bringing you our next conversation on Let's Talk Wellness.